Ladies and gentlemen, today is a sickening day for America. Now, what I say, I don't say lightly. The NRA and the NRA Chief now says that the terrorists are on the verge of overwhelming us. And given the subject matter of terrorists, what is the local government agenda? To ban guns from terrorists. And remember, according to this guy, they're on the verge of overwhelming us. So the actual plot will be banning guns for people suspected of terrorism or mentally ill, and confiscation thereof. And then it'll basically be drafted that, well, we now have 20% of the public, or 30% or 40%. Well, everybody's a danger at one point or another. Poof. And then the NRA is going to say, you know what? We didn't know. We're sorry. Well, this is actually going on, folks. The NRA to allow gun confiscation because terrorists are on the verge of overwhelming us. That's going to be their defense. Now, I want to say no to this, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, because they're a lobby group, money goes where they are all the time. Come from CBS, NRA Chief, terrorists on the verge of overwhelming us. And it no longer says Muslim, it no longer says radical extremists. It just uses a blatant term, terrorist, which means any number of people with any number of ideologies for anything that any group does not view as groupthink or group agenda. Now, they're going to basically say that after the week or so after the 49 people were killed in the Orlando nightclub, the NRA president, Wayne LaPierre, said on Sunday gun control legislation would not be effective in stopping mass shootings in the United States. Gun control legislation. Of course not. He's going to sing, he's going to dance. But let me show you here real quick what the title reads, and this is basically his idea. Terrorists are on the verge of overwhelming us. And what does the White House want to do? They want to ban guns from terrorists. So the NRA is going to allow them to ban guns from terrorists and everything else of that sort. And then the government's just going to expand that to include everybody for being one suspected group or another. And then the NRA is going to go, well, you know what? We didn't know. And then basically choose who is and who is not on that group. Basically, anybody inside the government is exempt, and anybody that's in the third-party group, such as officers of the law, firemen, EMTs, among others. Basically, if you don't serve the government, you are a suspected terrorist, and at some point or another, you will either have them confiscated or banned or both. And the NRA chief is going to go along with this. But as long as you're looked at as a terrorist who's on the verge of overwhelming us, the NRA chief and the NRA is going to support it. Remember, they're going to support it all the way down to the moment before they go, oh my God, we didn't know. Yes, you did. I look at the NRA like any other lobbying group. I have never gone to any NRA meetings. I don't believe in it. If it's not a government agency, it should not exist. I understand it does great things, but I also think that they're just as corrupt as any other lobbyist group in the country. And they have their agendas as well. Line our pockets and we'll let it slip a little until we can prove we didn't know. Alright, basically LaPierre said the idea of using a watch list to determine who's legally allowed to buy a gun is flawed because federal law enforcement often wants to gather more evidence to build a case against potential terrorists. I've never seen much information or much misinformation and poorly researched stories of last week. They set it up exactly the way they wanted it, he said, the watch list. What law enforcement wants to do is do 90% of the time, 99% of the time, is let it go through. They want to watch it. They want to build a case. And the NRA chief said allowing individuals to own their guns is so important because terrorists will focus their attention on soft targets like schools, malls, and churches, places where law enforcement are without presence. Now, he's going to go and say individuals to own firearms. But, ladies and gentlemen, he's not going to say the American people as a whole because he is in their back pockets. You can't go into Washington politics and not be in their back pocket, folks. I'm telling you, LaPierre's already been bought out. There's always going to be people outside of the main group of government and their third-party support groups like the police, among others, who will have firearms like their associated families, etc. But the main body of people, I imagine, at some point in the next however long, 2, 3, 4 years when this finally kicks in, will not be allowed their firearms. They'll be labeled terrorists, mentally ill, and other ideologies. So this is a big deal, folks. And I do believe beyond a reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that the NRA is about to turn on America. And the NRA is going to allow gun confiscation, the banning of guns, because the terrorists are on the verge of overwhelming us. And that is going to be what they're going to say. And that is what they're going to do. They're going to allow them to push it under terrorism. And as long as any small percentage of Americans are not labeled under that group where they can own guns, they can legally say, oh, the NRA has allowed firearms to not exist, or to exist in the hands of regular people. Even if it's the kids in your kids' schools who now have firearms because their fathers, brothers, sisters, etc., are police officers or something along the lines of that. So I've always looked at the NRA as a scapegoat group. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, the NRA is going to allow gun confiscation because terrorists are on the verge of overwhelming us. Thank you.